How do you create the right kind of culture, which is something leaders have to start. You have to start by respecting the people and giving them an opportunity to put forth their ideas, giving them a safe work environment to be in, psychologically safe work to be in. Don't blame the people, because people make mistakes and that's just human. But most of the time people make mistakes, it's not intentional. It's because there's a bad process in place.
Welcome to KPI Fireside. Our mission is simple: to improve companies and to improve careers through continuous improvement. In every episode, we explore the spark, the moment, the mindset, or the method that ignites real change. Whether you're just starting out or leveling up, you'll find the insights and inspiration to fuel your next improvement. Welcome back to KPI Fireside. Our guest today is Ken Snyder. Ken is the executive director at the Shingo Institute. Ken has been with the Shingo Institute for quite a while. He served on the advisory board and as a Shingo examiner since 2009 and 2010, respectively. And prior to joining the faculty at Utah State University, Ken has spent over 30 years working in industry. So he's got broad experience from both education and from the business side of things. Ken has a degree in Japanese history and spent some time in Japan, which I hope to get a chance to talk a little bit about, and an MBA from Harvard, so with a focus on international studies. So all that to say that Ken is an expert. He has a lot of wisdom that he can share with us. For anybody who might be looking to improve their company or improve their own career, Ken is a great source of knowledge. So Ken, thanks so much for joining us here today.
Well, thanks for having me, Keith. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Ken, one of the things that we like to do here on this KPI Fireside podcast, we like to start with a little segment called The Spark. And one thing that I've found in all of the people that I love to work with in this continuous improvement discipline, however you refer to it, I find that a lot of folks had a moment where they got switched on to this thing as something that might be part of their career. And I can tell from your history that there probably was many moments, but is there a particular moment that you remember early on that was the spark for your journey down this particular path?
Really, there wasn't a spark. There's been a number of aha moments where I realized one aspect of it was like, oh, finally, I get that. But I started off interesting that I served a mission in Japan in the 1970s, and it was the middle of the oil embargo. Many people won't even know what that is, but it's the Arab countries decided to shut down their oil wells and stop selling oil to the West. And so the West, meaning Western Europe and America, as an effort to get OPEC going and give them political clout. And as a result, we went a couple of years where we had no gas, and then we had gas, then we had no gas, and we had gas. And it created a lot of chaos. And that was in the middle of that is when I went to Japan and discovered that the only car company, because there was no gas, nobody bought cars. And so the car companies all lost money for a couple of years there, except for one car company in the whole world, and that was Toyota. And what was different about Toyota was kind of intriguing to me, but then what was different about Japanese businesses in general was kind of intriguing to me. And so I came back to the States after serving 2 years in Japan, and with a desire to learn a lot more about Japanese history, and hence the Japanese history major. And then but the intent of getting into business and understanding what's different about Japanese organizations. I could tell there was something different. I couldn't articulate it very well then. I just could observe it and recognize it. I couldn't articulate it. And I wanted to know more. I wanted it to be part of what I did with my career. So it kind of started way back then. This was mid-1970s, so I've been doing this for about 50 years now. And I even wrote my master's thesis on applying Japanese business practices in Western companies. A little bit of, I don't know if you know Theory X, Theory Y, McGregor's background of McGregor's
Go
theory.
into it. Sure, yeah.
Okay, so Theory X is kind of command and control. Theory Y is trying to do a different approach where you try to encourage the engagement of the people in the organization and so on. And that was kind of an emerging thing in the 1960s and 70s was this Theory Y. And there are a number of organizations that kind of were leading the charge on that. And I'll just pick Hewlett Packard as an example. And then there was, when I went to write my thesis, wanted to write it on that, but applying Japanese business practices. And there was an academic article written on the academic who wrote the article called Theory Z. And one of my professors turned me on to Theory Z, and it was actually taking Japanese business practices and bringing them to Western business culture. I still have a Theory Z book that came out about a year after I wrote my thesis. So I kind of felt like I was on the forefront of that. I finished business school and went to work for a Japanese company in Japan and spent a couple of years there, and then worked about 10 more years for that Japanese company, but got deeply into the improvement efforts that I think all companies should have, but Japanese companies tend to be better at than Western companies in general. But it all started with just seeing the differences because I was in the culture.
That's so interesting. I know a lot of folks get introduced to this improvement thing through, some people maybe early on who worked at one of these companies and were sent over their own business. I think that it's interesting that your story starts from just an assignment with your church to go to Japan,
Mhm.
but you probably didn't choose that location, right? You were probably just kind of dropped in there. I doubt you spoke the language at the time.
They sent us to a 2-month immersion language school. So luckily, the immersion language school was in Hawaii, and that made it very tolerable. We could speak English 1 hour a day. We had a very strict regimen of how many words we're supposed to learn and what grammar we're supposed to learn by what date and all of that.
It's interesting. So how did you get involved with the Shingo Institute?
I didn't get involved with the I was aware of the Shingle Prize back in the 90s. I remember reading articles about it and I was aware of it. And I was very dedicated to the improvement effort, or what in Japan they call Kaizen. I was very dedicated to the Kaizen movement that as it got adopted by different people who studied like Toyota.
Kaizen means
Kaizen means improvement. It basically means getting better, change to get better. To literally, a literal translation of the characters would mean that changed for the better. I don't think it was well articulated in the West until maybe the books by Shingo and Ono came out, and The Machine That Changed the World was published by the folks at MIT. That early 90s was the first time there was actually literature in the West in an organized way that helped people understand. My learning was all piecemeal. I'd pick up a little here, a little there, working with a Japanese company. We did have a lot of the Japanese books that were popular at the time. For example, Ishikawa's books on statistical process control and so on. So I learned a lot of the tools. I didn't understand many of the principles behind it, or maybe I just gradually came to understand it through osmosis, as opposed to being able to articulate it or have somebody clearly articulate it and teach me. I left the Japanese company and had a chance to start up another company from scratch, Greenfield. And I built a one piece flow, almost perfect one piece flow factory. We had one batch process that we had to do it as a batch, but everything else was one piece flow. And even the batch process had like a minute 20 changeover time. So I knew SMED before I had ever heard the term SMED. I knew one piece flow before I'd ever heard the term one piece flow.
interesting.
And the people would ask me, why are you designing it this way? And it was like, well, because we want to get it from beginning to end as quickly as possible.
It's just the way you did it.
It's just the way you're supposed to do it. And they go, but why? It's easier for me if we do batch. And I go, no, it isn't. I couldn't articulate it. There's lots of things that I learned through osmosis, but I didn't even really realize that I'd learned them until later when you start putting some framework around it. You go, yeah, of course we did SMED because we knew we needed to have the product flow. Why do you need to have the product flow? Well, because it's everything's easier. You don't have to worry about the inventory. You don't have to worry about rework because you can stop and fix it while you do it. You don't have to have an inspection at the end if you do it right. There's so many things that I just picked up through osmosis.
You just
Then
learn the right way.
you just learn the right way. And could I articulate it to the people who were working for me in the factory? Not very well. And that's a struggle. And I've struggled with that. The Japanese company hired me to start a factory, And so I started as a plant manager in a couple of years after I graduated from my MBA program, and trying to teach people some of the principles, I struggled. And then this greenfield, I had a chance to start from scratch and didn't have to try to reteach people. But even then, I struggled teaching people. I didn't have a model that I could point to and say, this is why you do this. This is the reason behind it. And it wasn't until we started to get some materials like The Machine That Changed the World, or some of the other books that came out. And even then, it was a struggle. And to me, the key part of the shingle model is it answers the questions why. The principles articulate the things that we should be doing to improve the organization. And it is something that is teachable. You don't have to learn it through osmosis over 10 years' time, like I did. And I was like, I now have a way, a terminology, lexicon, if you will, of this is how I can explain this.
The
And I
language,
can
the model.
explain what, and I can explain why. So people can know what they need to do and they can understand why they need to do it.
Let me start with a question about the Shingo Institute at the highest level. What is the mission of the Shingo Institute?
To improve the process of improvement. We're all about helping people improve the improvement process within their organizations. Get
I
better
love that.
faster. And it shouldn't take people 40 years to get as far as I got. I've been doing it for over 40 years, almost 50 years now, and it's like I I'm still learning things, and we've made it so hard to learn this just because it came from the Japanese and they didn't know how to explain it. A lot of it came from the Japanese. Some of it we already knew it in our business practices, but there's so much that we struggled to be able to articulate. And a lot of the early Japanese senseis that came over were not good teachers. They were good practitioners and they could show people, but then again, it was the lived and worked in Japan, and I'd learn things, but I still couldn't. I struggled to articulate it. They struggled to articulate it too. And what the shingle model brings to the table is a way to have people understand what's going on, understand why they're going on, give them a framework to look at how can we make it better. And so our goal is to help organizations get better faster,
And
improve the process of improvement.
you've got a language or a model or a framework. I forget what the right
Model, we
word is.
call it the shingle model, and
The
that's
Shingo model.
yeah.
Tell us what are the elements of the Shingo model.
Elements that we have different elements. I'll tell you where we started and where we ended up, okay? Because there's a little bit of a story. I warned you I'd tell stories.
I love stories.
Okay, so when we started the Shingo Prize at Utah State University in 1988, and this was an effort by a publisher by the name of Norman Bodek, who arranged for the translation of Shingo's books and Ono's book and some other books. And he also was very prominent in the operational excellence field, publishing just general books, so Deming's books and so on. And Norman, at Utah State, we hosted the very first operational excellence conference in North America. It was the only conference for many years. And so Deming and Duran and many other leaders in the operational excellence field or quality field or whatever came and spoke at our conference. Utah State was the happening place. Now, if you look at the general calendar of OPEX conferences, last time I looked, there was like 44 of them happening in the United States. It used to be just one in Logan, Utah, at
General
Utah
Logan.
State University. Yeah. So that's part of the reason why it's at Utah State, is because of the history of the conference. And Norman, as a publisher in the field, was a constant presence there. And he got together with one of our academic leaders, a guy by the name of Vern Bueller, and they concocted this idea of we need to start a prize to encourage companies to strive for excellence, to strive to get better, and recognize the companies that accomplish that, so we can hold them up as an example to everybody else. Say, these guys are great. Go see them. And so they launched. Norman gave a gift to the university to be able to finance the startup of the Shingo Prize, which was a nice. And we started the Shingo Prize in 1988, and it's been around now for 37 years. It has grown from what was intended originally to be just North American recognition of manufacturing excellence, and even manufacturing was in the name of the title to begin with, to a true global standard of excellence. We now have recipients in over 35 countries. We have them in multiple industries, not just manufacturing, but in other production related industries such as mining, but also recipients in banking and in healthcare and in insurance and in uh, various different industries. And so it's grown around the world and it's broadened through to a number of different industries. The same principles apply no matter what kind of process you're working in. They may look different because you're not making a product, you're providing a service. But I'll just give an example. If somebody needs an insurance claim done, you want it done quickly because you've had some damage to your house or somebody died and you want to make a death claim.
You
That
must
is
know
a
about the flood I
process.
had in my house last week.
There's a process there that benefits everybody if it's shorter and
If
done correctly. And that's true whether it's manufacturing, whether you're a patient in a hospital, or whether it is a claim for an
yeah,
insurance company. The same principles apply everywhere. And principles are a big part of the shingle model that wasn't part of that. So I'll go back to the history. The original framework that we had three elements to it. One was you had good lean tools. I'm using lean in the
yeah,
machine that changed the world definition of it. Good lean tools, good lean systems, and you got good results, and you could get a shingle price. And what we discovered is over time, most of the organizations that received a shingle prize, the first 15 or so years we ran it, were unable to sustain improvements. They got better, the results got better, and something happened like a change of ownership or a change of management, and then
into management.
and then they'd go down, and some of them got so bad, some of the recipients got so bad, people came to us and said, "You gave them a shingle prize? Really? You gave them?" And we knew there was something missing, and that launched a research project on my predecessors because I didn't come until 2008. So around 2004, launched a research project on looking at the companies that couldn't sustain and what were some of the causes there. But more importantly, looked at the shingle prize recipients who kept getting better and better even after receiving a shingle prize, because they're the ones we need to learn about what does sustainability look like and how could they sustain that improvement effort and still keep getting better and better over time. And we learned a couple of really key points. The first thing we learned is that they focused on behaviors and not results. They focused on the behaviors that drive the results, not just the results themselves. If you focus on the results, it's too late. You got to look at the things that cause or that drive those results. And so we developed a way of phrasing that. We say ideal results require ideal behaviors. Okay. The second thing we learned is, and I'll give you a quick example,
Sure.
safety. So
Yeah.
a manufacturing plant that has nobody get hurt. What we found is that the companies that kept getting better and better, they focused on things like every time somebody saw a safety problem, they reported it and took some action to make sure that that safety problem never resulted in somebody getting hurt because they took some sort of preventive action to stop it from being a risk anymore. And they track the risks. They track the reports. They track the mitigation of risk, how long it took them to get it done, and having a solution in place so that nobody ever got hurt. And so what we saw was even the best organizations got better and better and had fewer and fewer safety incidents. And they did the same sort of preventive actions with regard to quality problems and maintenance problems and so on. And so it's a way of saying maintenance or prevention is better than trying to address a problem after the fact. Second thing that we found, though, is that purpose and systems drive behaviors. Purpose in the sense that every organization that we saw that kept getting better and better had a clear purpose. And that clear purpose was something that the team members to the executives, all of them understood, agreed with, bought into, and were emotionally motivated by a
Mhm.
purpose. And they could articulate it. And I'll give a local Utah example of Autoliv. You could go to anybody in Autoliv and ask them, what's your purpose here? And they'll say, we save lives,
Save lives.
right?
Yeah.
And it motivates the people in Autoliv to think about what can I do in my job to save lives. Purpose drives behavior. It becomes a filter for everything they do and for every idea they have is, what can I do to help save lives? But what we also found, and this is why it's not just purpose drives behavior, because sometimes people say they have a purpose, but then they do something completely opposite, or they have a system in place which forces the people to do it exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
And so you've got to make it easy to do those right things. And that comes down to the systems in the organization that actually people have to follow as part of what they do. And so you have to change the way the systems operate to make it easy to do the right thing and hard to do the wrong thing. And so we phrase that as purpose and systems drive behavior. So purpose first, systems to make it easy. And the third thing we found is whenever we talked to the companies that kept getting better and better and better, they could answer the question, why? We'd say, why did you do that? And they could say, well, because we wanted to get better product flow. Or why did you do that? So, well, because we stopped doing inspections here because everybody does an inspection as they do the work. And we have a way of making sure they're doing it the right way because we've got standard work right here and they can all see it. They could articulate a reason for why. We took all of those reasons and we borrowed a little bit from Stephen Covey and used his term principle because the reasons they gave us were what we thought this is true. Everybody's giving us the same answer, whether it's the company we're talking to here or the company we're talking to there that keep getting better. They're all saying the same sorts of things.
Ken, what are the 10 guiding principles for the model?
Okay, so we have two in what we call our cultural enablers dimension. We have them in three dimensions. We look at them, first of all, from a people point of view, and that's what we call cultural enablers dimension. We have two key principles. One is respect every individual, and the second one is lead with humility. And we find that they're kind of interconnected. One is a top-down look at it, and the other is a bottom-up look at it. But the people here need to look at them by respecting them, and the people here need to have their voices heard by people who are willing to listen and act on it. And it's what enables the engagement of the people in the improvement effort. And if you don't have the people doing the work engaged in it, you're going to have a bad culture. If you've got the people engaged, you create a good culture. To us, that is the definition of a good culture, is the people are engaged in the improvement effort. Now, it's up to leadership to make sure that you do other things to make it more effective. So we put that as kind of the base of the way we frame it in an image is we have a pyramid, and the base of the pyramid is cultural enablers. We have 5 process-oriented principles, and we call that continuous improvement dimension. This is actually improving the process, and so the first one of those is focus on the process. Focus on process. It's don't blame the people because people make mistakes, and that's just human. But most of the time, people make mistakes. It's not intentional. It's because there's a bad process in place. There's a defect in the process. And you got to fix the process and not try to fix the person. The person didn't do it intentionally. It just happened. And now you go, oh, it's just an opportunity to fix our process, make it better. And if we have that kind of a look at it, focus on the process. It's also the process of how it flows. That's what we want to look at. So one of our principles there is improve the flow. And usually that's done by focusing on how it pulls through the process, not how we push something through a process. So are we responding to customer demand? Because if we're responding to customer demand, we're going to get better flow, but we improve flow. We control quality better by assuring quality when something is done, not trying to inspect it into something later on. So we call assure quality at the source. That's an important part of it. Sometimes the source is at a vendor's place, not at our place. Sometimes it may be in whatever it may be, but we assure quality at the source. Think systemically is another one. This is probably the one that we find still the biggest challenge for people out in the world. We see a lot of organizations that have really good improvements going on, but their improvements are all going in different directions. They're not aligned to making the whole better. And so to us, I'm going to borrow a little bit of Russ Acuff. He always used the analogy of making a car better. And he likens, improvements that are not aligned. He would liken it to, okay, so you put a better engine in a car, but you don't improve the suspension and you don't improve the brakes. So what have you created? You've created a monster. You can't stop and you can't go around a corner without rolling, you know? And so have you made the car better? No, because you all you've done is created a bigger problem. And he'd use those kind of analogies, and I think they're very appropriate. We see people making improvements, but they're not making the company better. They're not making the factory's performance better, whatever it may be. They're not aligned with what they need to do. So we have three principles in our enterprise alignment dimension. And this is all about getting alignment that I was just talking about. One is create value for the customer. We need to focus on what the customer needs, and if we are providing what they need, to create value for them. Secondly, we borrow a little bit from Deming. We call it create constancy of purpose. And that is Deming had 14 points. I don't know if you know the Deming 14 points, but number one was create constancy of purpose. So we shamelessly just borrowed that. But to us, it still means what we found at the shingle organizations that kept getting better and better. It was something that people understood, bought into, were motivated by, emotionally tied to. This is why I love coming to work reason. It's not just create a constancy of purpose. It's create unity and emotional tie-in and power behind the cause of the purpose, if you will. That gives you an idea what the principles are about.
Yeah, that's that.
And so as we ask people about why they do the things they do, and I'll give a more complicated example. How do you get people aligned? There's a term that's used in Japan called hoshinkandi, and it's about strategic alignment. So the leaders of the organization set specific goals. We need to, our goal is we're now at 60 ppms per million or something like that. uh, 60 bad products every million pieces we make. We want to get it down below zero, down below one, into the zero range. And so how do we get there? And you look at the different people who have defects occurring because of what they do somewhere in their process, and you assign them, okay, you work on this, you work on this, you work on this, and they all accept, they say, well, if we're going to do this, we need this, 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 and this. And so leadership provides them the resources, but it's aligning everybody around a common cause of we're going to get to zero defect. And so their efforts are aligned. And I'll give the counter to that. I visited a company once that was getting people engaged. Their biggest problem was the amount of scrap they were creating. And scrap came from defects, but also from many other things. And so they had a chart up on their wall that had, here are the number of ideas we have from our employees. And they had skyrocketed over the last 2 years, skyrocketed the number of it. But if you looked at their scrap number, they also had that up on the wall. Scrap had remained constant. And it made me ask the question, of course, of what are the ideas about? If you say you need to reduce scrap and that's going to impact your bottom line the most, and it also improves your quality because some of your scrap comes from quality issues, what are the ideas about if it's not about scrap? Scrap is constant despite the number of ideas. You have them thinking about the wrong things. So how do you direct, that's what the idea of that strategic alignment is about. You create a system around that. You get people engaged in it and so on.
For me, one of the things I love about continuous improvement, and you mentioned some names like Stephen Covey. I think that there's a lot of gurus and experts out there that have lived these very full lives. I've heard the phrase standing on the shoulders of giants before, right? You use the phrase like borrowing this and borrowing that. I think that this idea of standing on the shoulders of giants, the evolution of scientific thinking is what we're all trying to do. It's what we're trying to do as a species, as a human species. We're all trying to evolve and get better. So when I was first introduced to this continuous improvement for business, for me, it was this like something that I had discovered with like the Stephen Covey idea that as your life's going to be better if you take this like whole person approach to principles as opposed to just focusing on one area. So one thing I like about lean is that inside of your business, like flow, like everything needs to flow. You can't just have one department that's really functional. You need them all to flow. So this discipline of continuous improvement, which a lot of times is represented by the way that Toyota did it, or Six Sigma, like the way that Motorola did it. There's all these recipes that exist out there in business of the way to do it, the way we do it around here. And it sounds like you guys have, as an institute, found a really good recipe or model that people can follow to get some predictable results.
So let me put that in the historical context, okay? We're named after Shigeo Shingo. He was the consultant that Toyota hired to help them develop the Toyota production process. He started working with Toyota in 1955. He continued working with them up until 1982. Decades of working with Toyota. One of the things that he did was he did a, a quarterly what they called a P course, productivity course that was like a workshop. Okay, so he'd do a workshop, these P course workshops with roughly 30 Toyota budding executives. You had to go through Shingo's workshop to advance within the corporation. And so they all went through a Shingo workshop at the time. And he taught them, it was largely, I've had a chance to review the content. It was largely what focuses on the continuous improvement dimension. It's how do you create one piece flow? How do you assure quality at the source? What does it mean to focus on process? And how do you embrace scientific thinking? And it's things like that is more how do you focus on the different process elements. Didn't teach him that much about alignment and how do you get the whole organization aligned. And he didn't teach so much in the productivity course the how do you create the right kind of culture. But then again, it's Toyota and they're in Japan, and the culture is something that just is part of their culture.
It just is.
And it's something that's native to our culture. And so it's not that relevant to Toyota in Japan. But you speak about giants. Shingo was the one who came up with one piece flow. That's a Shingoism. He called it non-stock production, that book right there. That's all about how do you get to one piece flow. And he called it non-stock because if you get to one piece flow, you have no inventory. There is no work in process inventory. So what he's saying is zero work in process. But now we just call it one piece flow. And why he chose that terminology, I'm glad it didn't stick because it's easier for people to understand one piece flow as a
Yeah.
as a term for it. He created quick changeover, the idea of quick changeover, SMED. He created the idea of pokeyoke, preventing errors from being able to happen, as opposed to trying to fix errors after they happen, as a way of getting rid of defects. And understanding that people will make mistakes. And so if there's a human element to any process that you have, you need to have a pokeyoke in place that stops your mistake from turning into a defect that reaches a customer.
And for Pokeyoke, we're talking about something like parts that only fit together in a certain way.
Right, right.
Like you can't, the one that then an analogy that comes to mind, you're connecting like two jumper cables on a car, and if you cross them over, like bad things happen, right? Like,
Right, right.
so,
So you make it so people can't do the wrong thing.
yeah,
And
that's
that's
brilliant.
part of a systemic or process related approach. And sometimes we can use process and systems interchangeably. So the system makes it easy to do the right thing and hard to do the wrong thing. And that you to change that as part of the system and the processes in the system.
So, Ken, coming back to this mission of improving the process of improvement, it seems like there's different times in the macroeconomic situation where more change is happening, right? The industrial
Like right
revolution,
now,
like right now, this AI revolution, right? How important is it for companies and leaders of companies to improve their process of getting better when faced with tidal waves like AI?
don't think AI is not the last technology that's going to come along to change our world. Just in my maybe longer than most people's lifetime, we've lived through the introduction of computers. There were some computers that were around, but even I remember when the first mainframe came out. So let alone the personal computer, I was already in my 30s when the first personal computers came out. And so it's like we've lived through computerization. We've lived through automation, where you could have the machine do a lot of things that operators used to do. We've lived through robotics. These are all things that everybody thought was going to change everything, and they did. But an AI will change a lot of things, and it should change a lot of things. And if AI can change something for the better, then by all means do it. So I'm going to go from the future and look backward, okay? And I can because I can do that because I've been through industry 3.0. I ran factories and then I got to see what automation can and can't do. I got to see what robots can and can't do. So now I can project forward and look back at what'll AI do and what does it look like. Here's what I know. Okay. I know that you can't automate a bad process. And if you have a bad process and you teach AI a bad process, all AI is going to do is hallucinate around a bad process. Okay.
Don't automate waste.
Uh, it- And it all we do when we use AI is create more waste. If we use AI when we have bad input, you've got garbage in, AI is going to create garbage out. And so what will AI do? It's not going to solve problems for us that we already have that are inherent in what we do. Okay. And the second thing I know is that the people who implement technology the best are the ones who have the best engaged people. They have a culture of people working with technology and using it in a purposeful way, which are guided by those principles, because they know why they want to do something and they think, aha, AI could help us do that better. And because they have a purposeful implementation of new technology, including AI, they can do it quicker and they can do it cheaper. They can do it for investing less capital money or upfront money or development money or time and effort. And what we have found historically from we get a chance to look at the best of the best companies when we have because they apply for the Shingo Prize. And we can compare them to companies like them in the same industry. And we can say, how much productivity are they getting out of their capital expenditures? Because they share data with us. And what we find on average, I'm just averaging out, is they get roughly twice the amount of productivity as measured usually by sales divided by number of hours into that go into those sales. So we're measuring productivity on input versus output. They usually have about twice the productivity. And then if you look at the capital expenditures, they have about half the amount of money they've invested in capital equipment. I'm
Wow.
looking more at a manufacturing, but it applies to everything else. You get twice, we call it a 4X factor. Okay. So you get twice the productivity for half the investment if you're smart about how you use technology. And the key is you use it in a purposeful way driven by the principles. And the principles will inform what you should be investing in, how you should be investing in it, what kind of outputs do you want to achieve by investing in it. I have seen some absolutely fabulous implementations of AI, and I'll just give one example. This is an AI system built into what's called Epic, which is the medical records. So I'll use this as an example, but they have a way of when you go see your general practitioner for your annual physical. Normally, it takes 25 minutes for the doctor to do everything the doctor needs to do, of which 10 minutes is meeting with the patient. The other 15 minutes are filling out the form that goes to the insurance company. So the insurance company's form, and the other is their medical records form that they have to keep a record of you. These are all the things they tell you about. Here's all the things they checked. Here's the test results for your blood test and your urine test and all of that. And all of that takes 15 minutes per patient. So over half the time right now under the old way of doing things up until AI implementation. So now what happens with this AI tool? The insurance form is filled out. The medical records form is filled out. It takes about 5 minutes for the doctor to review it for accuracy and make corrections. And so 10 minutes for the patient, 5 minutes for the forms, and you've saved 10 minutes. Now here's a valuable person that we have a shortage of already almost everywhere in the world. And we're increasing their productivity by almost double by taking them from 25 minutes down to 15 minutes per patient. They can see what, roughly 70% more patients, something like that. Or they could spend more time with patients that before they were rushed because they had another appointment that filling out their, or they don't have to take records home and fill them out at night because I talked to a lot of GPs who had to do what they called their night work, which is filling out
Yeah,
all the
yeah.
records that they couldn't get to because they had too many patient issues come up during the day. Um, this is a wonderful use of AI, and it changes the way we can then plan for what our doctors do and how they do it, and how many more people can they see. We can do this with everybody, though. There's ways to use AI to improve productivity and quality and get better throughput, get better quality, get better. So the principles are you think about, can we use AI to improve quality? Can we get more done with AI? And yes, the answer is yes. And if we are smart about how we do it, in other words, purposeful, following the principles, then yes, we can use AI better than anybody else. And that will be an advantage in the marketplace. So I'll go back to improve the process of improvement. Does AI help us improve the process of improvement? Absolutely. It helps us improve improvement itself. It can help us even identify the problems in the process that AI might even be able to help us with.
I love the way you describe your mission as the process of improving, because if part of running a company is the work that we do, the value add work and figuring that out. Let's say we get it just perfect for this point in time. Well, immediately tomorrow, one of our competitors or somebody else has done something that now we got to get a little bit better. So this process of improvement feels like something that is a never ending. Well, it's not like you can just improve once. You've always got to get better at improving.
But one thing that our capitalistic system insists on, though, is that we keep improving. Because if we don't keep improving, somebody's going to be improving, and they're going to come out with something better than what you have, and you're going to lose market share, and eventually your company's going to fail if you're not improving. We have to improve.
I think that there's something empowering about this discipline, this work, and understanding, how things work in a business, cost versus expenses. And, I mean, somebody who just has learned a particular skill and might not understand, like might not see these things, but the thinking that goes into a lot of this process improvement work, I think is really good for everybody. Let me ask you a few questions about the people that you work with at the Shingo Institute in companies. What size companies does the Shingo Institute work with, and what kind of individuals do you guys work?
Small companies to large companies. Some of the biggest international companies use the shingle model, a Fortune 50.
So it's something that some small business owner, somebody that runs a tire shop, or
They
somebody who just invented something that they're selling on Etsy.
I'll give you some examples that we know of a couple of dentists who have applied it in their dental offices. The shingle principles and the trainings that they get, they figured out how to get better patient flow through their dental office, how to do their records better, how to do their billing better, how to do particularly the treatment of patients inside their mouth. We've seen it in law firms that have adopted the shingle model. How do you get better quality on the cases that you write up, your research briefs or whatever it is? So it doesn't matter what kind of organization it is. It can be small, it can be large. We have, if you look at our recipient organizations, where the organizations that have received the Shingle Prize, a good chunk of them are multi-billion-dollar companies, though, too. And
I
and
saw
we'll have, and I'll use the example of Abbott. Abbott has, I don't know, 120 different facilities, and they have four major divisions. And then across the divisions, they've got about 120 different operating sites. And we've got maybe 10 or 12 that have received a Shingo Prize. So they have a corporate initiative to implement Shingo throughout their organization worldwide. And they have people internally that support that. They have some standards they've set up, uh, worldwide, and so they have support people, they have trainers, they have, coach internal coaches and so on. They have a lot of resources that a small company doesn't have.
And you guys have a lot of like free resources and websites. There's videos and stuff
Yes,
that I've
yeah,
seen.
they
So
have a
it's
lot of
pretty
stuff in
easy
there.
to get
We also
introduced
have
to.
we also have a network of what we call licensed affiliates, but they're partners of ours who are mainly consulting companies, but they also deliver Shingo workshops. So we have a set of curriculum on that teaches the model and how to implement the model, and what kind of, we learn a principle, for example, respect every individual. What are the systems that impact that? Well, if you don't have a good communication system up and down the organization, you're not going to be able to hear what the people are saying. So you're not respecting their opinion because you haven't built a way to listen. And if they have ideas, if you don't have an idea management system, you're not respecting them, because even if they have ideas, you have no way of even hearing about it or implementing it. And you need to have some sort of recognition system. If somebody has a good idea, you want to be able to tell them, "That's a great idea. Thank you." But
And if they,
if you don't have a recognition system, you don't have a way of doing that.
yeah,
We
good
teach them
idea system.
Yeah, so we teach the principle, but we also help them understand the systems that help support that principle and how to make those systems so that they can drive those ideal behaviors. And so we do that. That's what our workshops are all about, is creating, understanding the principles better, creating the systems that drive those ideal behaviors so that you can get the ideal results.
So let me Let me
Yeah.
ask you this. If I was like a manager, maybe a business unit or function leader, not the CEO, but VP kind of level or something inside one of these big companies, and maybe I use Shingo, I was exposed to one of my past companies, or maybe I listened to this podcast, I'm interested in it, but my company hasn't fully adopted it. How would you what would you say to me, or how would I position that inside my organization? Like, who do we need to get engaged in this Shingo thing to move forward with it? How does it start?
Uh, Sometimes it starts from the top down, and that makes it easier because you've got the executive support that you need when it's a top down initiative. The risk you run if the executives are too involved, then it's something that doesn't stick. And when the executives go to their next opportunity, you get new executives, they want to make their own mark and they change everything because the last guy did this. I'm not going to do it. So if it's only executive driven or only executives and engineering driven, it won't stick. We've got plenty of examples we can say. But if you're a mid-level person who wants to do it and you don't have executive support, the best way for them to approach it is do it, show the results, and then go, here's why I got these great results.
Love it. Just do it.
And then usually what will happen is if they can do that, then the executives go, we want more like that. So then they encourage others to do it too, and you get them to support it. In a big organization where you've got multiple sites, what they do is you get a leadership group at a site or a couple of sites who raise their hand and say, we want to do it first. Let us try this. And then as they succeed, then they get held up as the lighthouse example within their organization. They're shining brightly because look at what they're doing, and we're willing to help you guys learn how to do this too. And what we end up at, I'll give you an example of a common phone call we get at the Shingo Institute. We've had a lot of organizations whose best plant in the world is in Ireland because the Irish leaders all got together and said, we want to be the best plant in the world in our respective organizations. And they all decided to get better together. So
Like cross
Ireland,
industry?
some of it even in the same industry, but don't tell anybody that because they probably let people into their plants that they shouldn't have. Like those competitors also came and we showed them how to do something and then they showed us how to do something and that sort of, but at any rate, you can edit that out if you want.
Oh, that's great.
But we've gotten a number of phone calls over the years where we'll get a plant leader from somewhere else in the world within that organization where the Irish plant is doing better than anybody else. And we'll get a call saying, we want to be like Ireland.
That's interesting.
And you go, okay, who are you with? And but, but it's because they see what greatness looks like and they say,
Yeah.
we want people want to be excellent. They don't want to be second rate and they see somebody doing something better. They want to be like that. They want to figure out how can we be even better than Ireland? Is it, and I don't know if you know this. The answer to the question, which country has the most Shingo recipients per capita in the world, and it's not even close, is Ireland.
Really?
Yeah, a country of 5 to 6 million people, and we have 15 different Shingo Prize recipient organizations.
Well, I like a couple of things that you said resonate really strongly with me, probably because it's kind of like overlap of mission that we have between our organizations and probably as individuals. But I have this core belief that improvement it has to start with an individual who is at some level dissatisfied or unhappy with things the way they are. Like at some level, a lot of these improvement people, myself included, a lot of consultants are this way. A lot of times people are consultants because they just can't stand to work inside of a mediocre process. And they're like, it's
But then
gotta
they get
change or I
then
gotta
they
get
get
out of here.
then their clients are mediocre. And
No, I think there's some truth to that. Like, I mean, obviously, you don't want to. I think that's where the respect is so important. And again, there's a lot of elements of this that I used the word recipe before. It's like your recipe or my recipe. There's elements of this where it's just truth and it just works, and it doesn't matter even what language you're speaking.
and those
Respect for people.
elements are the principles.
There you go. The
That's why
principle.
we use the term principle because, and I'll go back to Covey's definition. It's a principle is something that's universal.
Universal.
It's true everywhere. It's timeless, meaning it was true 40 years ago. It's true even in the world of AI. It's going to be true 1,000 years from now. The world will look a lot different then, but the principle will still be the same. And there are consequences to following the principle and not following the principle. and you'll get better consequences if you follow it. And the final thing is it answers the question why.
Answers the question.
So that's why we use that term principle, is because when people recognize the truth, if you will, the truth is really in the form of a principle. You
Yeah.
get better quality when you assure quality at the source, as opposed to
Prince-
inspecting it in later or not even looking at it or whatever else you may do or not do.
Principles are like these universal laws, like gravity.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
if you're
Yes.
going to be an airplane pilot, you better understand the basics
Lift.
of gravity and lift.
Lift. You need to understand lift. There's a principle
Yeah.
of lift that if you don't understand, you can't be a good airplane.
If you're going to manage people, you need to understand the basic principles of respect
Yes.
and things like that.
Yes. And if you don't respect people and you just want to command them and you think of them as a tool, you're not going to get their engagement, and you're going to be limited in how much you can improve with you just telling everybody what to do.
So Ken, I want to come back to this theme a little bit about how what executives need to understand about continuous improvement and how it sits in the organization, because I know, like, it seems like this engagement with Shingo or continuous improvement in general, it could be something that somebody takes on just inside their department or function. Hopefully, it's something that the entire organization from the top down gets behind. But what are some maybe mistakes that people make about improvement? Maybe thinking that it's a one time thing or doing as a temporary initiative versus permanent.
I will say probably the most common thing we see is that it's siloed. It's implemented in silos and doesn't spread throughout the whole organization. It's limited because that you've got a good leader over this silo, but the top leaders haven't. It said, fine, you do your thing, but don't see value enough to get others on board. That's both a leadership thing and it's also a middle manager thing, an
Mhm.
executive thing and a middle manager thing. We see a lot of that. We also, in big organizations, we see good plants and bad plants. We
Yeah.
see plants that are Shingle Prize recipients, and then we see other plants that are ho hum. How can you have this all within the same organization? It's because you've got good leadership here and an engaged workforce. They think they're doing just great, even though this one's outshining them, head and shoulders above them, and they don't care. And how do you get them to care? How do you get the leadership to care? How do you get the team members engaged when leadership doesn't? I mean, you have so many different problems you have to deal with in those cases. So I'd say that's the biggest thing we see is inconsistencies within an organization and then within the enterprise as a whole.
I've noticed that just in my own experience as a manager of anytime you got more than two people doing a thing or two things doing a thing, and you get that variation, you're always asking, why is one of these so much better or so much worse? And the systems thinking, the belief that, hey, there's got to be a reason why this happens. You brought up a term a few minutes ago, and I just kind of went past. I want to come back to it. Could you explain the difference between KBIs and KPIs?
Okay, so the best company I mentioned in the research that we did that they focused on behaviors. Okay, so they measure when you want to have a focus on behaviors, you need to measure what matters, and behaviors matter. Having people report safety problems, for example, as the example I gave earlier, matters. And the way you do that is you develop measurements so people can measure the behaviors. And we call those KBIs, key behavioral indicators, same format as KPIs, key performance indicators, which are results, the after the fact, or as Shingo would have called them, the death certificates, because they're already dead. You can't do anything about them. They're dead and buried. There's nothing you can do about them. If you don't focus on the behaviors, you're not going to be able to change anything. And so, but you've got to be purposeful about that. Finding and measuring those behaviors, finding what are the right behaviors to measure, first of all, is difficult. But then measuring it, how do you measure them and how do you track them? So one common measure we like to see is ideas that people generate. And you can look at it from total number of ideas, or you can look at it from, is everybody submitting an idea to, are every somebody from every department submitting idea? There's lots of different ways you can slice and dice it. But if you're not measuring it, you have no clue about anything. Or have you got broad engagement across different departments? Have you got broad engagement across all the people in a department? Or is it just a couple of people doing all the ideas? There's that completely different cultures can be analyzed if you've got a KBI of we're measuring ideas, the number of ideas generated. But you've got
I
to
hear
measure it. To us, that's one of those essential KBIs that everybody should have.
I love this topic of ideas is a juicy one for me that I want to talk about. When you ask people for ideas, what do you have to what sort of context do you have to give? If you say, "Hey Keith, give me your ideas." And I'm like, "Hey, how about we have pizza for dinner?" And you're like, "Oh, no, no, no. I'm talking about like
So
ideas for business
we've
process improvement."
seen we've had a chance to look at hundreds and hundreds of companies who do this, okay? And so we've seen the whole gamut. Some organizations require that there'll be a substantial financial impact before they call it an idea. If it's just something rearranging something on your desk that saves you a couple of seconds here or a couple of seconds there, they don't count it. That's just something you just do. Or there's even a phrase for it out there among many companies. It's a just do it. It's not an idea. It's a just do it. And then there's other organizations that want you to document every single just do it along with all the other ideas that may be, save a couple $100,000 because you've got an idea of how to do this differently. And so they treat it all this isn't, this one little thing that changes one little thing at one little place is counted the same as something that saves hundreds of thousands of dollars. And different organizations we've seen do it differently. And I don't think we care. I've never heard any of our examiners mention we don't care. We just care that you measure it and you're using it as a way to drive the right kinds of behaviors. Because if somebody's thinking about a $200,000 idea, trust me, they're also thinking about everything else. They're thinking about small ones, even whether you count it or not. And the key things that we look for as examiners at the Shingo Institute is we want to make sure that the ideas that are generated actually make a difference. And that's why I mentioned that up front is a lot of ideas don't. In some ways, they make it worse. They're like the motor in the car. They make things worse. And we want to be looking at the ideas and seeing, are the ideas making the organization as a whole? And that's the most common thing we see is that so many ideas out there don't make the whole.
This episode is brought to you by KPI Fire, the all-in-one platform for continuous improvement. With KPI Fire, you can align strategy, drive execution, and engage your people. So whether you're leading a team or driving enterprise-wide change, KPI Fire helps you deliver real results. Learn more at www.kpifire.com. You mentioned something a minute ago about the importance of having a feedback system, right?
Yes.
I heard a talk one time from a consultant who was doing an interview with somebody who had worked at Toyota, and they were sharing their wisdom about the Toyota production system. And he said something that I remembered, and I always found it interesting. He said the ideas that they're sharing were intended or supposed to be or limited to be like their area of work rather than ideas telling other people what they should do. And I was like, I mean, an idea from me to somebody else could be like a piece of their feedback mechanism to know what they might
Okay,
want to
so
do
let
differently.
me be a little more specific upon what I think they mean. Okay, and personal experience. I work in Japan at a plant there for a couple of years. I go back to the States and we start up a plant in the States. And we have this feedback system that we set up so we can get ideas from people. At the very beginning, 100% of the ideas are all about things that I should do as the plant manager to make life better for them. Okay. And most of them were things we couldn't do or things we purposely did not want to do, or you name it. It was just like, can you need to do this? Can you need to do that? And it's like, okay, this is not what the idea system is all about. As the people got better trained and they could understand why we do the things that we did them and why we were doing them and how to do them, and as they got better trained, they came up with really good ideas of how to fix a process, how to improve a process. And that's what you want. So what you don't want is me saying to somebody else, I've got an idea so how you can do something better. That's not that's not the job of people, and unless there's what you want is. And so I'm going to put this take out the personal, go back to the process. What you want is ideas that improve a process of something. It doesn't matter whether it's yours or somebody else's. And I don't think Toyota limits any idea that anybody has on how to improve a process. If anybody objects to any kind of idea, it's because it's personal and because it's not relevant to a process.
Are there any other words of wisdom that you could share about as managers managing this idea process? Are there some like key insights about if you're going to ask for the ideas, like how to respect the ideas, or any other interesting insights about how to run that?
The best systems about ideas that we see have a timeline to them. Well, first of all, there's an escalation. There's the things that they can do themselves, and they need to be able to be empowered to be able to do that. There's things that they can do within their work group, and they can take care of it in their huddles. People need to be empowered to do that. They don't need to escalate those to, I need a new tool to be able to do this. Can you buy this tool, which takes it up a level? Or I need some engineering support to be able to make a plate that does this, guards this thing right here that is a safety risk or something like that. I don't have access to the machine shop. Can the machine shop make this plate for me? Or there's things you can escalate and can go laterally without going all the way up and all the way back down. You've got to, so the idea system is something that you need to make it tie it into the communication and how you tier your communication system. There's things that will require going up a level before they can come back down. And that's what I mean by feedback.
Yeah.
But I was never this good. But I've seen some companies who have implemented a never say no. So when it comes back down as a no, you rephrase it as we understand the problem. We can't do it because of this, but can you help us think of another way we might be able to tackle that and be able to make the improvement that you're suggesting? And so it becomes a discussion and a plan that might generate, but for whatever reason, we can't do it.
I think that's very interesting. Yeah, the levels thing is a very interesting one. Like when I think of just do it, it's like, hey, if it's something that I know how to do, I have the time to do, I have the bandwidth to do, like I'm just going to do it. If it's something that hey, I need a little bit of help from so and so to do this, but it would be great. And then you get all the way up into like the things that require major capital to
Yes.
take on, which different decision cycles. I think that makes sense to most people that those things exist on different timelines.
I think you've got to tier it up and then you've got to have a way of tracking it too. So people can understand, I submitted that idea, but I have no idea what happened to it. I'm not going to do any more ideas until I find out how this system works, you know, or last time they told me no, so I'm done giving them ideas. Those are the things you don't want to have happen. You kill the human minds that are saying, uh, they don't care about my ideas. They only care about that person. You don't want that. You want everybody to feel involved. You want everybody to feel like it's their opportunity to come up with ideas for improvement. And we value your opinion. We value your input. We understand that you could bring something to the table.
I know one of the challenges that folks that are in traditionally like a CI function where they're maybe working with somebody who reports to a plant manager or something, but they have, let's say an organization has maybe something like a VP of continuous improvement. They have this established, but sometimes they do struggle until, if they follow your methodology, they probably figure these things out. But is there any advice that you can give on how somebody could show an ROI in a way that they can communicate with executives about, hey, we should invest in this thing, this continuous improvement discipline in the Shingo specifically?
Yeah, I think just how much money do you spend and then track all the things that people do because they got trained. Just as an example of this, I want to go back to something you just said a second ago and make sure you understand the better way, and make sure you avoid the wrong way. You said, let's just say they had a VP of CI and they had a CI group. There's there's the who's responsible for improvement. What you don't want to have is people saying, I don't worry about improvement. That's their job. It's the last thing in the world you want because that means I've disengaged because they do all the improvements and I'm not responsible for it. I can just come to work and not use my head and think about things. I am not engaged. I turned off my brain. I can go through the motions here. And we see that incidentally more frequently in hospitals than we see it in manufacturing firms. I'll just tell you
And
that
what does that look like as a bad behavior? Does that look like just certain projects and initiatives get handed off to a couple of people and they kind of
they
run
do
off to the
everything. Yeah,
side?
those are the improvement people, and they do all the improvements. And if they come do stuff to us, and sometimes we ask them to come help us do stuff, but they do it, and we
So
don't have to worry about it.
if that's not the ideal behavior, what's a
This is
better way for that
not
group
the
to
ideal
function?
behavior. And it's interesting, and I'll answer the question by telling the story of Toyota because Toyota never had a CI group for the first roughly 20 years of doing TPS. And then the downturn due to the oil embargo happened. They had realized they needed to be a lot more flexible and improve a lot faster. And that was kind of the first time they started creating a CI group, is when they went through some of the worst times. And it was, they took some of the best people at coming up with ideas and implementing ideas, and they made them coaches for everybody else. So instead of calling it a CI group, they became an improvement coach. And a coach implies that they don't do it. They're there to help you do it because they're good at
Sort of.
helping others do it. And if you keep that mentality of improvement is everybody's responsibility, but you have a coach you can turn to help you if you're struggling with something, that's the way you want it internally. And even sometimes you might need a coach from the outside because you need some outside eyes every once in a while. And that's what our licensed affiliate partners are all about. They're consultants who are, much more experienced than maybe somebody internal to an organization. They can come in and help those when you get stuck with stuff. That's what Shingo was too. When Toyota hired him because he knew things that Toyota didn't know yet. But it's still got to be the individual's responsibility to make improvements. And it's got to be an organizational wide and I'll borrow a little bit of Masaki Imai, who's another Japanese sensei who's well known, the shoulders that we stand on. Everybody, everywhere, every time. It's everybody does improvement. Everybody, every department, every person in every department is responsible for improvement. And it's something that even if you made an improvement today, you should come thinking about, what am I going to do next? Not that I'm resting on my laurels so I can say, I did my improvement idea for this month. I don't have to worry about it till next month. And it's not
Like
that
a
kind of thing.
quota for That's
It's
one thing that I find is I find a lot of things in life exist on this tension, like I kind of have this visual of like you go to the carnival and you have the tightrope walker and he's got that rope. And if there's no tension on one side of the rope, like you don't have an act. So this tension of like you want to ask for ideas and you want to see if everybody's participating, but you don't necessarily want to set like, well, you have to generate two and only two. So there's like a tension there that exists.
Well, and as soon as you put out a number, that they're going to quit when you give them the number.
Yeah.
And you don't want that. And you have some people that are really good at smaller incremental ideas, and you have some deeper thinkers who are looking at fundamental process change because they see a problem that maybe others don't see. But how can we get rid of this whole step in the process and redo everything, or maybe have to rearrange everything? And they'll think through something like that, and they'll go off and putter themselves and test some things up before they'll ever bring out about an idea because they have no idea if it's going to work, but they're not going to have the same small incremental ideas that others have. And it's a good mix. You've
Oh,
got those who are ready
yeah.
to make big leaping changes, but they're infrequent. And you get others that are looking at the frequent incremental changes step by step. And you need them both. You can't just disregard somebody because if they're really engaged in thinking deeply, give them the time to think deeply and don't say you've got to meet this quota. And on the other hand, if somebody's one of those, I come every day and I want to find 2 seconds, Paul Akers
Yeah, yeah.
thinking,
2 seconds.
I want to find 2 seconds every day, that sort of thing. Let them do it because they're going to find little thing by little thing by little thing. And it's going to have this multiplicative effect that you actually make some big changes over time, but you do it step by step by step by step. And it's okay. You want both. You need both. Both are good.
So I have this phrase that I like to say, if you don't have one, you are one. So for example, if I don't have a cook, I am a cook. If I don't have a lawn guy, I am my own lawn guy, right? Like if I'm running a company, if I don't have a graphic designer, maybe I am the graphic designer. I got to find one. So in the context of like the job of a CR function or the leader, I guess two angles here. What are the things that the CI function might do in an organization? And then how much of a person's time who isn't in that CI function, how might they think about how much time they should spend on this improvement thing?
Everybody should be thinking about it all the time. So when I'm going to use, maybe we should have talked about this at the beginning, but continuous improvement does not mean you have to, every improvement has to be linked in this step by step process. I've seen people who think that's what it's supposed to mean. And to us and to me personally, to me, continuous improvement is everybody's thinking about it continuously. I'm working on it continuously. I am continuously trying to find ways to make the work of the Shingo Institute better all the time.
So would it be fair to say that continuous improvement in your ideal organization is a core value? It's something that's
Yes.
it's a
And
core
there's
value.
a set of principles around that, but it's our terminology. The Shingo model is it is a dimension that which we cannot escape from. It's something we have to do. And when we say continuous, it is every all the time. It's continuous. It's continuous. It never stops. We never stop trying to improve.
Okay, I want to go into this. You mentioned something about the theory X, theory Y. So I'm kind of referring back to some of the research and some of your comments on what that is, and you could explain a little bit of what that is. But one thing that I think about a lot is I can't imagine anybody who on their first day of work at a new job was anything less than excited and optimistic about what the future held, right? I think this maybe a little overstatement, but most people, when they come to work on the first day, they're excited. They think it's going to be a great fit. They think it's going to be a great company. The world is going to be amazing. And then something happens and people become disengaged at some level. And I believe that this idea of continuous improvement is this light that can shine on people and on organizations to help create that balance. I'm wondering if this idea and your understanding of theory X versus theory Y and what is just natural behavior for humans, how we can get the most out of people at work and also enjoy work, right? I think we spend a lot of time at work. We ought to be doing something that we like doing and that fuels us and drives us.
So Shingo in his books calls people who kill ideas idea killers.
Idea killers.
I mean, that's exactly what they are. Command and control, by definition, is an idea killer. If only the boss has good ideas and that's what the boss thinks and that's the way the boss manages things, then everybody else doesn't need to think. You've killed all the ideas through command and control. It's over. And you're not respected as an individual and the boss isn't going to listen to you anyway. So why do I bother thinking? Why do I bother trying to improve anything? Everybody turns off immediately. So there's idea killer number one. Idea killer number two is if you listen to if somebody submits an idea as an example and it just gets a flat out rejection, no. And you can, like I said, you can go back and say not no, but we can't do this way. Is there another way? Or we can't do this now because we have to do this other thing first, and or we whatever it is, always keep people engaged when they put themselves out there and put forth an idea and they want some respect and they'd like to see a yes, but it's not a yes. How do you treat them? Because how you treat them at that moment can kill their ideas forever, or you can turn them on and keep them engaged. And that it's really important to treat people with ideas with the respect required to keep them engaged. That's an idea killer number two. And I can tell you the biggest broad sweeping idea killer we see is people who then leaders collect ideas, make productivity improvements. That frees people up. What Toyota did is made those people coaches. They picked the best people out, the best coaches out, and made them coaches. And what we typically do is we say we're going to lay this group off because we don't need them anymore.
Yeah, that's
And
sad.
and and it becomes the idea becomes a weapon used against them. And the weaponization of ideas to punish workers by laying them off because they came up with a good idea is an absolute 100% eternal idea killer. The second you weaponize ideas to lay people off, you've killed the idea. You've killed the culture.
So
Those are some examples of idea killers, both on a little level, beginning, and then also how do you like just wipe them out altogether?
yeah, what's funny, Ken, is I know that a lot of times there's this talk that happens between let's just say employees and then leadership, and there can be an us versus them mindset a lot of time. And one thing I know from interacting with a lot of executives that there is no company that exists anywhere that doesn't want more people that are good at solving problems and doesn't want more good ideas, right? And most leaders that I know, myself, I'll even include myself in this. we always intend to do great things and inspire ideas, but then we do these behaviors that just crush people's motivation and crush their
And
spirit.
that's the middle one I was talking about. It's not that you're not command and controlled necessarily. You're trying to do good. You just sometimes don't listen to people or don't respect them, or they do an idea and you kind of pass it off like I don't have time for this now or whatever it may be, and you kill an idea. Or you can just, you can do what some I've seen organizations do this. They use lean tools to punish people. Okay, you're supposed to learn all this stuff and get better, get more productive, and then when it's all done, they then lay them all off, and you can kind of go.
So let me just
So getting
tie
back,
this back. If
you're pretty common though in that, and that's where it's really important to not do that.
And again, like intuitively, this is one of those things, the thinking, knowing, the thinking, doing gap, right? Like we all know that to be healthy, you exercise more and eat less. But tonight at 9 o'clock, I might tap into the Ben and Jerry's, right? Like I know that I shouldn't do it, but I still do it.
Doesn't everybody have ice cream at night?
But like as leaders, I think we know that we shouldn't do these things, and probably sometimes even unintentionally, unknowingly, we do these things. Is there something that you might be able to say, like kind of motivate someone? Maybe somebody works inside of a company and they're like, look, I'm not going to share any of my ideas because last time I did that, they said no. So I'm not going to share any more ideas. Or the manager who's like, I'm not going to ask my people for ideas because last time I did, they gave me dumb ideas and I don't even want to hear from those again. What might you say to those type of
Okay,
mindset?
to the dumb ideas one, I'd say you haven't put enough effort into training your people. It's on you. It's on you as a leader. Your job is to get them to where they understand enough to they can come up with good ideas. And if they're not coming up with, they're trying and they're trying to come up with ideas, but they're not good enough ideas, then you as a leader are failing to train them well. To me, that's what I would say to that one.
The person who's like, I'm not going to share any of my ideas because last time I did, they just
How
ignored
do
it.
you earn their engagement back is then the question, because somebody before you met probably, or you could, but it could be you yourself, turn them off. You killed their idea, so you killed their thinking, and they don't. Now, why do I bother? I don't want to spend this much time and effort to come up with an idea and then submit it just to have it shot down. And so why bother? That's why. And so how do you re-engage them is somehow you need to think about them as an individual. What can they bring? Encourage them and then treasure the idea they come up with next so that they can keep coming up with ideas. Some of that might be giving them a new opportunity and with a challenge to it and then say something along, we're really struggling with this process. I'm hoping with your experience, you might be able to come up with some ideas of how we could make it better. You open a door that they thought was closed and you can reopen it again. Somehow you want to get them re-engaged from how they were treated in a way that turned them off.
Yeah, basically, try again. Try again until it works because it can work. It does work.
It
Like you
does
say, there's
does work.
principles.
It does
There's
work, and
yeah.
I get to see really great organizations all over the world where it works, and so I agree, it does work, and I love to walk into I'll just kinda I'll give one final story. I visit a lot of plants in China, and a lot of manufacturing for the world happens in China, even if tariffs are now adjusting that a little bit. One of the worst factories I went into, I was told they said, could you come visit us because we have the best continuous improvement program in the world. That was their claim. And I walked in the plant and it was dark. Nobody, absolutely nobody had a smile on their face. You could tell the people hated what they did just by the way, the sadness that was drooping from their eyes. And I talked to some of the team members there and none of them had any idea. I asked him, "What have you ever implemented an idea?" No. Have you ever thought of an idea that you might want to implement? No. They were 100% disengaged, totally turned off. Just the sadness that they exuded was depressing and help me understand why China has the highest workplace suicide rate in the world. I get a chance to visit great places, really good engagement from everybody. I could go up to anybody and ask them, "Have you had an idea and was it implemented and how was it implemented?" And I did that with a number of different people in that facility. They said, "Yeah." and this is the change it made, and here's how it improved the productivity or the quality or whatever it was about. And it was like, and I even went into some of the support functions. Have you had any ideas? Yes. And so it was, and they were so excited, and people were smiling and engaged and loved their work. And I go, okay, this is not a China thing. This is like everywhere else in the world, a leadership thing. And it's how do you engage the people? How do you create the right kind of culture, which is something leaders have to start. You have to start by respecting the people and giving them an opportunity to put forth their ideas, giving them a safe work environment to be in, psychologically safe work to be in. And how do you make sure you communicate well and all those things that help build that right kind of culture. It takes leadership to start it, and then engaging the people, and then reinforcing it over time. It's the same that happens everywhere in the world. You'll get people that love their work, and they'll be engaged, and they'll be do some really great stuff.
That's excellent. Let me just ask you a couple of call these the rapid fire questions. These are just quick questions, one phrase, sentence kind of answer, pretty quick
Yes.
here. The most important job of a leader is to
Lead
blank.
with humility.
Lead with humility. I love it. Is there a book that you recommend people start with, or one that's on your reading list currently?
Um, to lead with humility, or just a book in
In
general?
general, just in general. Separate
Okay, so
question.
I was on lead with humility. The one I always go back with is leadership and self deception. If you haven't ever read it, if you wanted to learn what humble leadership is like, yeah, I recommend that one. That's a good one to start with.
Is there I could maybe guess one name that's on this list. Is there a mentor that you'd like to acknowledge or uh, share?
On a personal level, Stephen Covey, because I got to know him and have some what I would call Stephen Covey aha moments. I may have used a different word at the time, like crap, he's right. So I called them my Stephen Covey oh crap moments. But Stephen was always more about leadership on an individual level, not leadership that changes the organization.
Self
If
leadership?
you understand the distinction that I'm
Yeah.
making, there's a kind of leadership that is internal, and there's also the behaviors a leader has that affect the rest of the company. At the Shingo Institute, we focus on the leadership that affects the rest of the company. But Stephen. I wouldn't necessarily call him mentor as a. He's made me think through my personal life more than maybe any other person I've run across
Yeah,
along the
he's
way.
definitely one that's is on my list too. So there's
There's that book, and the one that really got me the most was the one that when he was writing it, he told me about it, and it's called "Live Life in Crescendo."
oh, okay. I don't know if I've read that
Maybe
one.
because I'm older than you and I need to think about what the rest of my life is going to look like.
Do you have a favorite question? Maybe even a couple
So
of
as
favorite.
an examiner, I found the best question to ask is the one I've been using is, have you implemented any ideas lately? Or have you ever had an idea to make an improvement or something like that? Because as you walk them through the process of asking that question, you can find out how their idea system is managed. You can find out how they were recognized with it. So you can find out about the recognition system. You can find out how it ties into the think systemically, how it ties into improving the overall organization, or if it doesn't. Because one time I asked a question of a team member and said, well, how does that tie into the goals that are the corporate goals that are sitting up there on the wall? And she looked up at the corporate goals like she'd never seen them before and said, I don't know. And to me, okay, you can learn all of that with starting with one simple question that people love to answer. Especially if they've done something, they want to brag about it. Well, give them a chance to brag about it and praise them for, oh, that's a great idea. Tell me about how did this work?
I
You
like
submitted
that.
the idea. Did you hear back from them very quickly?
You had any ideas lately? That's a great one.
Did you have to go through engineering approval or through management approval? Was there a budget info? You can really get into understanding a lot of the systems around it with one simple question to start.
That's a great one. This is another finish the sentence. Continuous improvement is
Continuously improving.
it's improving. There you go. Okay, and then last one. What are you most fired up, most excited about right now in your life and where you're at?
Whew, fired up. We just launched the Shingo Student Center at Utah State University. I've been working on or hoping and trying to get this done for a long, long time. And what's difference between a center and a club is probably too much for us to go into right here, but it's a way of creating different learning activities, learning opportunities, learning experiences for students that a club just can't do, because a club is like you go visit a company or you do this, or maybe you do some little green belt project with a club. This is, to me, raising it a whole level in terms of the importance and emphasis that it's placed before the students. So what's got me most fired up is getting this up and going before I sign off. So yeah, I love it's the first, it's the Shingo Institute and the Huntsman School of Business working together to leverage the opportunities that the Shingo Institute brings to our undergraduate students.
Excellent. Well, Ken, is there anything that you want to share with our listeners, a resource or a website or upcoming events
Well,
or
if
anything that
they
you
want
want
to
to
know
share?
more about the Shingo, it's really simple. Our website is shingo.org. There's a section of our website that has a brief overview of the Shingo model that we've talked about, and we encourage whoever wants to. We also allow people to download a free handbook about the Shingo model. It's about a 40-page handbook. It's not very big and takes about 45 minutes to an hour to read all the way through it. It gives you a really good overview of the model, and we provide that for free electronically anyway. So I encourage people to visit the website and take advantage of the resources that are there. It also has a listing of all of the recipients in the 35 plus countries around the world and contact information, what industry they're in, and what are some of the highlights of their Shingo Prize recipient journey. So there's lots of good examples that you can read about their particular stories, and then how to contact them if you want to go visit. We really try to create the website in a way that it's a resource to people who are interested in improving the process of improvement. We also have links to our licensed affiliate partners who can be the senseis that come in and teach workshops for you, or be the outside eyes that you need every once in a while to come in and say, we can't solve this problem. We need somebody with more expertise. And we've curated those partners very carefully to get some of the very, very best people in the world are the ones that represent us, and we love working with them because they're all really great people, and we
Yeah, we've
enjoy
we've
them.
had a couple of them on this podcast.
Have you? Okay, so you know who I'm talking about. I look back and I remember fondly watching Toast Kaizen videos. I don't know if you've ever watched the Toast Kaizen videos, but
Bruce,
Bruce Hamilton. So
yeah.
Bruce is the very first licensed affiliate partner we had.
Oh, wonderful.
And I, knowing him as the Toast Kaizen guy, and then meeting him when I got to the Shingo Institute, was like, this is the Toast Kaizen guy.
He's got some great.
Wow, I got to meet the Toast Kaizen, and so that's what I mean when you get Bruce. Not only that, he was the plant manager of the very first plant that received a Shingo Prize. Okay, so
Interesting.
long, long, long history in the improvement world, and very famous for his video. He now runs a blog called The Old Lean Dude.
The old lame dude. That's funny.
Look it up, and it's just that's the kind of people that we associate with. So I get to hang out with people like Bruce Hamilton all the time, and it's wonderful.
Well,
Well,
Ken,
yeah.
this has been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed having you on here. Love to have a conversation again in the future sometime. So thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me, Keith. I appreciate it, and good luck. I hope this helps you, but I hope it also brings some people to Shingo as well. So thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So this concludes this episode of KPI Fireside, a continuous improvement podcast. If you have enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us on the socials and share the podcast with friends or colleagues who are as passionate about continuous improvement as you are. You can find us wherever you get your podcast. And until next time, keep driving progress and sparking change.